What if the woman you love hides a terrifying secret? What if the kind healer in your village is actually an aswang? Miguel never believed in monsters, until the night his village turned against the woman he swore to protect. Accused of a gruesome crime she didn't commit, Isabel is now being hunted. But as the torches close in and the truth unfolds, one question remains. Is love enough to save a monster? Or will fear destroy everything? Stay tuned for an unbelievable story of love, betrayal, and survival. Ang buwan ay mababa sa tahimik na bayan ng San Rafael. Ang pilak nitong liwanag ay nagtatapon ng anino sa makapal na kagubatan ng Bakawan. Isa itong lugar na balot ng misteryo, kung saan ang matatandang kwento ay bumubulong tungkol sa mga nilalang na nagkukubli sa dilim. Ang mga taga-bayan, na matagal nang naniniwala sa mga sinaunang paniniwala, ay takot sa mga espiritu at kakaibang nilalang, lalo na sa kinatatakutang aswang. Sa kabila ng mga pangamba ng bayan, isang tao ang hindi natatakot sa hiwaga ng mundo. Si Miguel Santiago, isang batikang manggagamot, ay kilala sa kanyang husay sa pagpapagaling gamit ang pinaghalong halamang gamot at tradisyonal na medisina. Bagamat maraming manggagamot ang umaasa lamang sa mga lumang pamamaraan, si Miguel ay nag-aral rin ng makabagong medisina sa lungsod, kaya't siya ay ginagalang ngunit may pangamba rin ang ilan sa kanya. Ang kanyang buhay ay nakatuon sa paggaling ng iba, ngunit isang pangyayari ang tuluyang nagbago sa kanyang kapalaran, ang kanyang pagkikita kay Isabel, isang mahiwagang babae na may matalim na gintong mata at isang kagandahang tila hindi makalupa. Nag-cruise ang kanilang mga landas isang bagyong gabi, nang may isang matandang babae mula sa kabilang nayon ang dumating sa klinika ni Miguel, halos hindi na makahinga. Mahinang bumulong ang matanda tungkol sa isang manggagamot na nakatira sa loob ng kagubatan, isang may kaalaman na lagpas sa karaniwang tao. Sa kabila ng pag-aalinlangan, nagdesisyon si Miguel na puntahan ang nasabing manggagamot upang iligtas ang matanda. Doon niya nakilala si Isabel. Hindi tulad ng ibang manggagamot, si Isabel ay tila isa ng bahagi ng kagubatan. Alam niya ang sikreto ng bawat halaman at halamang gamot, at nagkaroon siya ng lunas sa mga sakit na kahit modernong medisina ay walang sagot. Sa una, nagduda si Miguel sa kanyang kakayahan, ngunit nang gumaling ang matandang halos patay na, napagtanto niyang si Isabel ay hindi isang ordinaryong babae, ang kanyang kaalaman ay sinauna, halos hindi pangkaraniwan. Sa bawat pagbisita ni Miguel sa kabubatan, lalong lumalim ang kanilang ugnayan. Ibinahagi ni Isabel ang kanyang kaalaman, habang tinuruan naman siya ni Miguel ng makabagong medisina. Naging kakaiba ngunit perpektong balanse ang kanilang pagsasama, isang pagsasanib ng agham at hiwaga. Ngunit ang pag-ibig ay may paraan upang pagtakpan ang katotohanan. Isang gabi ng kabilugan ng buwan, sinundan ni Miguel si Isabel papasok sa mas malalim na bahagi ng kagubatan. Ang paligid ay tahimik, kakaiba ang paggalaw ng mga puno, tila may babala. Sa gabing iyon, natuklasan niya ang lihim ni Isabel. Nang marating nila ang pinakamadilim na bahagi ng gubat, nagsimula ng manginig ang katawan ni Isabel. Ang kanyang paghina ay bumigat, at ang kanyang gintong mga mata ay nagsimulang kumislap sa isang hindi pangkaraniwang liwanag. Bago pa man makagalaw si Miguel, bumagsak si Isabel sa lupa, ang kanyang mga daliri ay humaba, ang kanyang kuko ay naging matatalim na pangil. Ang kanyang magandang mukha ay napangiwi sa sakit habang dahan-dahan siyang nagbabago. Nanatili si Miguel sa kanyang kinatatayuan, hindi makapaniwala sa kanyang nasaksihan. Ang babaeng kanyang minahal, ang kanyang kasama, ang kanyang guro ay isang aswang. Sa kabila ng kanyang takot, hindi siya tumakbo. Hindi siya sumigaw. Sa halip, lumapit siya, tinitigan ang nilalang sa kanyang harapan. Ngayon alam mo na, mahina ngunit puno ng lungkot ang tinig ni Isabel. Ito ang sumpang dinadala ko. Ngunit ang mundo ay hindi kasing unawa tulad ni Miguel. Mabilis na kumalat ang balita sa bayan. May nakakita kay Miguel na pumasok sa kabubatan at hindi bumalik hanggang sa bukang liwayway. Ang mga bulong-bulungan ay naging akusasyon at di nagtagal, nagtipon ang mga tao na may dalang mga sulo at sandata, humihingi ng paliwanag. Pinilit ni Miguel na ipagtanggol si Isabel. Hindi siya halimaw, anya. Ang nais lang niya ay tumulong. Ngunit lumapit ang pinakamatandang tagapayo ng bayan, may bigat sa kanyang mga mata. Isang aswang ay mananatiling aswang, sabi nito. Mahal ka man niya ngayon, Miguel, ngunit darating ang araw na ang gutom ay mananaig. At kapag nangyari yon, walang makakapigil sa kanya. Pinilit ni Miguel na huwag maniwala. Ngunit alam ni Isabel ang katotohanan. Matagal na niyang nilalabanan ang kanyang uhaw, ngunit alam niyang hindi na siya kailanman tatanggapin ng bayan. Kaya't upang protektahan si Miguel, ginawa niya ang pinakamahirap na desisyon, ang lumayo. Sa gabing iyon, habang bumabagyo, tahimik siyang umalis. Matagal siyang hinanap ni Miguel, paulit-ulit niyang tinatawag ang kanyang pangalan sa dilim, ngunit si Isabel ay nawala na. Lumipas ang maraming taon. Ang dating bata at masiglang mukha ni Miguel ay napalitan ng mga guhit ng paglipas ng panahon. Ngunit kahit kailan, hindi siya nakalimot. Hanggang sa isang gabi, sa ilalim ng parehong buwan na minsang naging saksi sa kanilang pag-ibig, bumalik si Isabel. At sa pagkakataong ito, hindi na siya nag-iisa. Sa pagbabalik ni Isabel, bumigat ang hangin sa buong bayan ng San Rafael. Ang kanyang presensya ay nagdala ng matinding kaba sa puso ni Miguel. Matagal na niyang pinangarap na muling makita si Isabel, ngunit hindi niya inasahan na darating ang araw na ito, lalo na sa ganitong paraan. Sa likuran ni Isabel, may dalawa pang figura na nakatayo sa dilim, mga nilalang na tulad niya. Ang kanilang matatalim na mata ay kumislap sa liwanag ng buwan, at kahit hindi nagsasalita, ramdam ni Miguel ang matinding enerhiya sa paligid. Miguel, mahina ngunit puno ng lungkot ang tinig ni Isabel. Hindi ko nais na bumalik sa ganitong paraan, pero wala akong ibang pagpipilian. Napalunok si Miguel, ang kanyang puso ay bumibilis ang tibok. Anong nangyari, Isabel? Saan ka nagpunta? Sino sila? Tumingin si Isabel sa kanyang mga kasama, saka muling ibinalik ang tingin kay Miguel. Noong iniwan kita, wala akong patutunguhan. Wala akong pamilya, wala akong tahanan. Hanggang sa matagpuan ako ng iba pang tulad ko. Muling lumapit ang isa sa mga aswang, isang matandang lalaki na may malalalim na mata at mukha na puno ng peklat. Tinutugis kami, Doktor, anya. Kahit saan kami magpunta, gusto nila kaming lipulin. At ngayon, ang San Rafael ang susunod nilang puntirya. Napatingin si Miguel kay Isabel, ang kanyang dibdib ay parang dinudurog. Ano ang ibig sabihin nito? Huminga ng malalim si Isabel. Paparating ang mga mangangaso ng aswang, Miguel. Mga sundalo at albularyo na ang tanging layunin ay ubusin ang lahat ng tulad namin. Wala silang pakialam kung wala akong ginagawang masama, kung ikaw man ang magtanggol sa akin, hindi nila ako pakikinggan. Nanlumo si Miguel. Matagal na niyang alam na kinatatakutan ng tao ang aswang, ngunit hindi niya kailanman inisip na darating ang araw na magkakaroon ng digmaan laban sa kanila. Ikaw lang ang makakatulong sa amin, Miguel, pakiusap ni Isabel. Alam namin na iginagalang ka ng bayan. Ikaw lang ang makakapigil sa kanila. Ngunit paano niya ito magagawa? Paano niya makukumbinsi ang mga tao na ang kanilang kinatatakutang nilalang ay hindi dapat ubusin? Kinabukasan, tinipon ni Miguel ang mga pinuno ng bayan upang ipaliwanag ang sitwasyon. Ngunit hindi pa man siya nagsisimula, isang matandang lalaki ang biglang tumayo at itinuro siya. Ikaw na mismo ang nagdala ng sumpa sa bayan natin, Miguel, sigaw nito. Dinala mo ang aswang dito noon, at ngayon, bumalik siya upang wasakin tayo. Nag-ingay ang buong bayan, ang ilan ay natakot, ang iba naman ay galit na galit. Hindi sila nandito para saktan tayo, sigaw ni Miguel, pilit pinapatahimik ang mga tao. Tinutugis sila, kaya sila bumalik. Kailangan nating tulungan sila. Ngunit isang matandang babae ang lumapit at humawak sa kanyang braso. Miguel, Anya, naiintindihan namin ang nararamdaman mo. Ngunit hindi natin maaaring hayaang manatili ang isang aswang dito. Hindi natin alam kung kailan sila magpapakita ng tunay nilang kulay. Nagpanting ang tenga ni Miguel. Si Isabel ay hindi masama. Ilang buhay na ang nailigtas niya noon. Ngunit kahit anong sabihin niya, hindi siya pinakinggan. Ang takot ng bayan ay mas malakas kaysa sa kanyang mga salita. Habang lumalalim ang gabi, bumalik si Miguel sa gubat kung saan naghihintay si Isabel at ang kanyang mga kasama. Anong sinabi nila? Tanong ni Isabel, halatang umaasa sa sagot ni Miguel. Tahimik siyang umiling. Hindi nila matatanggap kayo, Isabel. Napayuko si Isabel, ang kanyang mga mata ay puno ng lungkot. Alam kong magiging ganito ang mangyayari. Lumapit ang isa sa mga aswang, ang kanyang mga kamao ay nakatikom sa galit. Kaya nga hindi tayo dapat humingi ng awa. Kung hindi nila tayo tatanggapin, wala tayong ibang pagpipilian kundi lumaban. Nagpalingalinga si Miguel, ang kanyang dibdib ay biglang napuno ng kaba. Anong ibig mong sabihin? Muling nagsalita ang matandang aswang. Kung hindi nila tayo tanggapin, ipapakita natin sa kanila kung bakit nila dapat tayo katakutan. Nanlaki ang mata ni Miguel. Huwag niyong gawin yan. Mas lalo lang silang matatakot sa inyo. Ngunit huli na. Ang ilan sa mga aswang ay nagsimula ng gumalaw sa dilim, handang maghiganti sa bayan na tumangging tumanggap sa kanila. Sa gitna ng kaguluhan, humarap si Isabel kay Miguel, ang kanyang mukha ay puno ng peghati. Alam kong hindi ito ang gusto mo, Miguel, bulong niya. Ngunit hindi ko rin sila kayang pigilan. Hinawakan ni Miguel ang kanyang kamay. May ibang paraan, Isabel. Hindi natin kailangang patayin ang sinuman. Ngunit paano niya pipigilan ang digmaan na malapit ng sumiklab? Sa sandaling iyon, nagdesisyon si Isabel. Sa kabila ng lahat, alam niyang hindi niya kayang hayaan ang kanyang lahi na malipol, ngunit hindi rin niya kayang saktan ang mga inosenteng tao. At kaya, isang sakripisyo ang kanyang kailangang gawin. Ano ang magiging kapalaran ni Isabel? Magtatagumpay ba si Miguel na pigilan ang digmaan? Itutuloy. The night was eerily silent, yet Miguel could feel the tension in the air. The aswang stood at the edge of the forest, their golden eyes glinting in the moonlight, their claws twitching in anticipation. The villagers, armed with torches and crude weapons, gathered at the other end of the field, their faces filled with fear and determination. A single spark could ignite the war. Miguel turned to Isabel, gripping her hand tightly. There has to be another way. Isabel's eyes, full of sorrow, locked onto his. I wish there was. She stepped forward, placing herself between the two sides. She raised her hands, signaling both the aswangs and the villagers to halt. Listen to me, she called out, her voice carrying through the tension-filled air. Never came here to bring destruction. Never wanted war. The village elder stepped forward, his expression hard and unforgiving. Then why have you returned with them? What do you want from us? Isabel took deep breath. Shelter. Safety. A chance to live without being hunted. A murmur spread among the villagers. Some lowered their weapons slightly, others tightened their grip. The eldest aswang, the scared one, scoffed. They will never accept us, Isabel. They never have. Isabel turned to him, her gaze unwavering. And if we force them to, we become no better than the monsters they think we are. The elder aswang growled but fell silent. Miguel took a step forward, addressing the villagers. These beings have lived among us for centuries. Some have done terrible things, but so have humans. Isabel has saved lives, she saved me. Not all Aswangs are killers, just as not all humans are good. The crowd wavered, doubt flickering in their eyes. The village elder's face darkened. You ask us to take that risk. To let them live among us, knowing what they are. A young villager suddenly spoke up. But what if they really mean no harm? What if we're driving away someone who could help us? The elder hesitated, but before he could answer, a new sound shattered the fragile moment, the distant blast of war horns. Everyone froze. Miguel turned to Isabel. What is that? Her face went pale. They found us. From the shadows of the hills, dark figures emerged. The Aswang hunters had arrived. The hunters moved with precision, clad in enchanted armor and armed with silver-tipped spears. Their leader, a towering man with ritual scars along his arms, stepped forward. San Rafael, he called out, his voice cold and commanding. You are harboring monsters. The village elder straightened. We are deciding what to do with them. The hunter smirked. There's only one thing to do with their kind, exterminate them. Miguel clenched his fists. You don't even know if they are a threat. The hunter's gaze turned to Isabel. She is an Aswang. That alone is threat enough. The other hunters raised their weapons. The Aswangs tensed, ready to fight. Isabel looked at Miguel, the silent plea in her eyes. Miguel knew what she wanted. A chance to prove herself. He took deep breath and stepped between both sides. If you truly want justice, he said to the hunters, let Isabel prove that not all Aswangs are evil. The hunter scoffed. And how do you propose we do that? Miguel turned to the village elder. Give her a trial. Let her stay in San Rafael under strict watch. If she harms anyone, then do what you must. The village elder frowned but nodded slowly. The hunter hesitated. And if she does not harm anyone? Miguel met his gaze without flinching. Then you leave her alone. A long silence stretched between them. Then the hunter chuckled darkly. Very well, doctor. But if she fails, he smirked. You will answer for her sins. Miguel swallowed hard. He had just put his life on the line for Isabel. And now, her fate was in her own hands. Would she be able to prove herself? Or was this trial doomed from the start? Isabel stood in the center of San Rafael, surrounded by wary villagers. The deal had been made, she would be allowed to stay, but under strict conditions. She could not leave the village alone at night, she could not enter any home uninvited, and most importantly, she could not harm anyone. If she failed, she would be executed. Miguel, standing near her side, could feel the weight of every gaze on them. He knew this wasn't just Isabel's trial, it was his too. He had staked his own life to defend her. At first, the villagers avoided Isabel. Mothers pulled their children away when she passed. The fishermen whispered behind her back. The town's healer, an old woman named Aling Marta, refused to even look at her. But Isabel endured it all in silence. She helped where she could, gathering herbs for the sick, assisting in the fields, even feeding stray animals. Miguel had told her that action spoke louder than words. One evening, a young boy, barely 10, fell from a tree while playing. His leg twisted at an unnatural angle, his cries piercing the quiet air. The villagers rushed to him, but no one knew what to do without hesitation. Isabel knelt beside him. Don't touch him, a woman shrieked. Miguel stepped forward. She can help. The mother hesitated, her eyes darting between Isabel and her suffering son. Isabel reached out gently. Trust me. With careful hands, she set the boy's legs straight, using herbs and a splint to ease his pain. By the time she was done, the boy had stopped crying. The mother, still uncertain, held her son close. But for the first time, there was no hatred in her eyes, only doubt. Days passed. The boy recovered quickly, and soon, word spread of Isabel's healing touch. One year the villagers began to test her. A man with a fever came to her. A woman with a deep cut on her hand hesitated but eventually let Isabel treat her wound. Slowly, the fear in their eyes turned into curiosity. Miguel watched it all with hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, things were changing. But not everyone was convinced. The Aswang hunters remained in the village, watching Isabel closely. The leader, Damian, did not trust her. This is a trick, he muttered to the village elder. She is earning their trust, only to strike when they least expect it. The elder frowned but said nothing. That night, Damian made his move. He followed Isabel as she walked toward the well to fetch water. When she was alone, he stepped out of the shadows. You're clever, he said. Winning their hearts. But I know what you are. Isabel met his gaze without fear. Then why are you afraid? Damian scowled. I am not afraid of monsters. She took a step closer. Then why do you hide in the dark? For a moment, Damian hesitated. Then, with a swift motion, he pulled out a silver dagger and slashed at her. Isabel jumped back, but the blade grazed her arm. She winced, but instead of fighting back, she did something unexpected. She did not transform. She did not attack. She simply stared at Damian, blood dripping down her arm. Miguel, hearing the commotion, ran to the scene. What have you done? He shouted, pushing Damian back. She's playing you all for fools. Damian growled. Miguel turned to Isabel, grabbing her injured arm. You're hurt. Isabel smiled weakly. I'll be fine. She looked at Damian, her voice calm but firm. You can try to kill me, but I won't fight back. Because I am not the monster you think I am. For the first time, Damian looked unsure. And for the first time, Miguel believed that Isabel might truly have chance to change everything. But was it enough? Would the village truly accept her, or was this trial destined to fail from the start? Days passed, and Isabel's presence in San Rafael was no longer met with fear but with cautious acceptance. The villagers no longer turned away when she walked past. Some even greeted her hesitantly, their voices unsure but no longer filled with hatred. Miguel saw hope in their eyes, something he had never thought possible. But Damian, the Aswang hunter, was not convinced. This is an illusion, he whispered to the village elder one evening. She is manipulating them. The elder sighed. She has done no harm. Not yet. Damian's eyes darkened. She is waiting. And so, he made a plan. One night, while the village slept, Damian crept into the livestock pen and slaughtered a goat. He left deep claw marks along its body, making it appear as though an aswang had feasted upon it. Then, he smeared the blood along the path leading to Isabel's hut. At dawn, the village awoke to screams. Ili aswang gini naman. There is an aswang again. The villagers gathered around the mutilated goat, fear creeping back into their hearts. Damian stepped forward, his expression grim. We allowed a monster to live among us. And this is the result. People murmured, fear taking hold once more. Miguel pushed through the crowd. You have no proof Isabel did this. Damien smirked. Then explained the blood leading to her home. All heads turned toward Isabel's hut. A dark red trail stained the ground. Miguel's heart pounded. He knew Isabel would never do this. But how could he prove it? The village elder frowned. Bring Isabel. Moments later, Isabel stood before the villagers. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed her hurt. I did not do this, she said firmly. Damien crossed his arms. Then how do you explain the blood? Isabel looked at the ground. The accusation stung, not because she was afraid, but because she realized something. No matter how much she tried, there would always be those who saw her as a monster. Miguel stepped forward. Think, everyone. She has lived here for weeks. She could have harmed any one of you, but she never did. Rarely would she start now. A few villagers nodded hesitantly. Damien scowled. Because this is her nature. She cannot fight what she is. The village elder studied Isabel closely. He was old, wise, and had seen many things in his lifetime. Then, he did something unexpected. He approached Isabel with a silver blade. A hush fell over the crowd. If you are truly innocent, the elder said, then this will not harm you. Miguel's breath caught. He knew the truth, silver did not just hurt Aswangs, it burned them. Even Isabel, despite all her efforts to live peacefully, could not escape what she was. The elder raised the knife and lightly touched it against Isabel's palm. A sharp hiss filled the air. Isabel flinched. The skin of her palm sizzled, a faint wisp of smoke rising from the wound. Gasps echoed through the crowd. She burns, a woman cried. She's an Aswang, another shouted. Damien smirked, triumphant. And now, you see the truth. Miguel's hands clenched into fists. He knew this was unfair. It was not proof that she had killed the goat, only that she was different. The village elder sighed. Isabel, you have tried to live among us. But the people are afraid. A deep sadness filled Isabel's eyes. I understand. Miguel stepped in front of her. This is wrong. You all know she did nothing. The elder shook his head. It does not matter. Fear is stronger than reason. Damien turned to the crowd. There is only one way to protect the village. She must be killed. The villagers hesitated, but fear was a powerful thing. They began to murmur in agreement. Isabel turned to Miguel. I don't want to hurt them, she whispered. Miguel's heart pounded. He had to do something. But before he could act, Isabel ran. She disappeared into the dark forest, leaving behind the only home she had ever wanted. Miguel watched helplessly as the villagers chased after her. Damien turned to him. If you follow her, you betray your people. Miguel met his gaze, unwavering. If I don't follow her, betray in my heart. Without another word, Miguel ran into the darkness, after the woman he loved. But deep in the forest, something else was waiting. Something far more dangerous than fear itself. The forest was alive with the sound of pursuit. Torches flickered in the darkness as the villagers, led by Damien and his hunters, chased after Isabel. Miguel ran ahead, his heart pounding. He had to find her before they did. Isabel, he called into the night. There was no answer. But Miguel knew where she would go. There was a hidden cave deep in the forest, a place they had discovered as children, a place where she had once felt safe. And he prayed she had gone there. The hunters close in. Damien moved swiftly through the undergrowth, his silver blade gleaming under the moonlight. He could smell the scent of blood, Isabel's blood. "She's wounded," he muttered to his men. "She won't get far." The hunters spread out, their weapons drawn. They had waited for this moment for weeks, and they would not let her escape. To them, she was not a woman. She was a monster. Miguel finally reached the cave, gasping for breath. He stepped inside and saw Isabel slumped against the cold stone wall. She was weak. The silver burn on her palm had drained her strength, and exhaustion had set in. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. Miguel knelt beside her. "I couldn't let them take you." Tears glistened in Isabel's eyes. "You don't have to do this, Miguel. You don't have to choose me." Miguel cupped her face gently. "I already did." A sob escaped her lips. For so long, she had fought to survive, to prove that she was more than what the world believed her to be. But no matter how hard she tried, she could never change what she was. She was tired of running. She leaned into Miguel's embrace, savoring what she feared would be their last moment together. Then, footsteps echoed outside the cave. They had found her. Damien stepped into the cave, flanked by two hunters. He smirked, raising his blade. "This ends tonight." Miguel stood in front of Isabel, shielding her with his own body. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." Damien's eyes narrowed. "So be it, eh?" With a swift motion, he lunged. Miguel dodged, grabbing a nearby rock and swinging it at Damien's arm. The hunter staggered, but he was well trained. He recovered quickly, slashing at Miguel's side. Miguel gasped as pain tore through him, but he refused to fall. Isabel's eyes burned with emotion. She could not let Miguel die for her. Summoning the last of her strength, she stepped forward. Her eyes turned golden. Her body trembled as she fought against the transformation. The villagers always feared the monster within her, but she had never let it control her. And she would not start now. Instead of attacking, she knelt before Damien. Miguel's eyes widened. "Isabel, no." Damien hesitated, taken aback. Isabel looked up at him. "I surrender." The hunters murmured in confusion. "I have never hurt anyone," Isabel continued, her voice calm. "But if early death is the only way to bring peace, then take a life." Miguel grabbed her shoulders. "Don't do this." She smiled softly. "This is the only way to stop the cycle of hatred." For the first time, Damien felt uncertainty. He had hunted Aswangs his entire life. He had seen them tear through villages, slaughter innocent people. But this one knelt before him, offering her life in exchange for peace. Could she really be different? His grip on the blade tightened. Then, the village elder arrived. "Enough," he said, his voice firm. "I have seen enough." Damien looked at him, anger in his eyes. "She's an Aswang. And yet, she has done what no Aswang has done before," the elder replied. "She chose mercy." A long silence filled the cave. Then, the elder made his decision. "She will live." It took time, but the village of San Rafael slowly accepted Isabel. She never asked for forgiveness, only chance to prove herself. And over the years, she did. Damien, though still wary, left the village, unable to understand a world where humans and Aswangs coexisted. Miguel and Isabel remained, their love stronger than ever. And though whispers of Aswang still filled the night, one thing had changed: fear no longer ruled San Rafael. Because one aswang had chosen love over vengeance. And love in the end had won. Thank you for following this story. Let me know if you need any changes or another story.